everyone. My name is Chelsea Rustrum, and I am the co-author of It's a Shareable Life and the founder of something called The Shares of SF, which is a social and educational series for the sharing economy. Very excited to have this chat tonight with two really amazing, inspiring people, and people I'm proud to call friends, Adam and Kate. Actually met Adam through a mutual friend, and we had great chats about writing books and how hard that is. We were both self-publishing at the time and kind of in the mix of it. And Kate, I actually met, I think, through a tweet where she was talking about Airbnb her place and traveling and using all these sharing economy services. And it was at a time when that was not so common, so I was very, very excited to meet her. But I will let each of them introduce themselves and kind of what brings them here tonight. So let's start with you, Adam.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for coming. I know there's a lot of places you could be in San Francisco, so thanks for coming to hang out with us for a bit. And thank you to Chelsea for having me and putting this together. Let's give a big round of applause to Chelsea. It all starts with bringing people together, so Chelsea made it happen.
Always.
But my name is Adam Smiley Pozwalski. I go by Smiley. You all can call me Smiley. I wrote a book called The Quarter Life Breakthrough, which I self-published last year in 2014. It's a guide for millennials to find meaningful work. So, you know, how many of you all have heard of the term quarter life crisis? And maybe keep your hand raised if you're currently going through one of those right now or are about to go through one, like starting next week. So we always talk about the quarter life crisis, this time in your life when you're kind of figuring out who you are, what you want, realizing that maybe the job you have kind of sucks, or that you want more out of life. So I'm trying to kind of take that, flip it on its head, and turn that period of exploration and quote-unquote crisis into a positive, into a moment of opportunity, possibility, where you figure out more about what you want and then go and have an impact on the world and find purpose-driven work. So that's what I do.
So I'm Kate Kendall, and I met Chelsea through Airbnb. I thought she was totally badass because I was like looking through the Airbnb listings, and she had an amazing studio apartment and was Airbnb being her couch. And I was like, oh, so she has people stay in the same room as her. That's really intense. But I was like, I want to go stay with her. I just thought it was really adventurous and totally embodying the sharing economy. Then we went and started up abroad in Bali that Chelsea organised in 2012 now, and I've got familiar faces in the audience. And that was an amazing kind of digital nomad and startup experience in Bali. So that was really great. And you can notice an accent. So I'm British Australian, but I started a company called The Fetch first, which was all around discovering different events in different cities. And for a period of around 2 to 3 years, I sold most of my possessions and was living, off Airbnb and traveling around and living in different places every month or two. So that was a really interesting time, and there's lots of pros and cons that we can kind of talk about that when you are living on the road. And then in the last year and a half, I've been working on Cloud Peeps, which is actually a marketplace for freelance content, community, and marketing pros. Tessa, who's our happiness leads in the audience over here. But that is completely a community of people that are working remotely and finding great things and following their passions and things like that. So lots of kind of insights there on scale and team collaboration and things like that.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm just really excited to bring together this conversation because a lot of the conversations that I do around the sharing economy are around the business element, but I think it's really interesting how the business aspects actually intersect with lifestyle, because we all want to lead more exciting and fulfilling lives and full of more, love and just happiness, I guess. So with that, how many of you, by a raise of hands, are entrepreneurs or want to be entrepreneurs? Want to be? Okay, very cool. Just kind of curious. So that leads into the next thing, which I think is a big part of sharing, purpose, life hacking, whatever word you want to use for all of these things. But it is, what is it, Adam and Kate, what is it that gives you the belief that you can do anything. And as a follow-on to that, how do you think others can cultivate that belief? Because I believe that belief is very, very strong and a lot of what drives us to just keep going.
Well, I think it came definitely from experience and almost my own quarter-life crisis. So I definitely grew up doing everything what I call tick box living. So I went and got my undergraduate degree, I went and got a master's, I went and had that job, I was in a long-term relationship. Everything was, almost by the book. And then it almost, in a space of like 6 months, everything changed. Just a series of events led to me almost going, wow, what happened? So almost, I feel like you can, swallow the red or the blue pill in life. And I felt like I was very much like almost in a zombie mode before that experience. And then it takes you to lose a lot of things or to then realize that you have to build up a great foundation. And I often talk about the notion of perceived security. So what we think when we go and get a full-time job or we go and do these things or sign a long-term lease, that you think they're going to be there for a period of time, and they often won't be. So it's through a lot of different experiences and challenges that I think I developed a very resilient mindset that then made me confident in the fact that I think I can do everything or can do anything, but it depends on, it's the ability to be resilient and to kind of keep chugging through. So most of the people that I meet that I think are absolutely credible have often gone through deep challenges or personal things, and they develop exceptional empathy. So I think if everyone has to go through their own journey and pick themselves up out of it, and then think from the end of that, that's where you go, you know what, like it's not always going to be perfect, but that's what I love about it.
Yeah, and maybe it's even learning to develop empathy for yourself through all of those experiences.
Yeah, definitely, like self-compassion. So I think when you are very much like, achievement-focused or tick-box living, you don't ever give yourself a break. And then when that happens, like, oh, wow, I need to be my best own friend to kind of...
Yeah, we're only here for 100 years. Maybe it should be fun. All right, Adam, you're up.
I love what you said, Kate. I think that's true. I think most people that have done remarkable things or started remarkable companies or work for remarkable companies or have written great books have all kind of experienced the opposite, have worked for an awful company, started an awful business, wrote a terrible book or couldn't write a book, and kind of flipped it on its head. And I'm always weary of young people that come up to me and they really want to do something great. I'm like, well, how? I kind of ask sometimes like, well, how have you suffered? And they don't have anything to say yet, which I'm like, go out and suffer a little bit. And then you kind of, it's crazy and it's kind of mean to say, but I think it's true. I think you have to experience the opposite to know what's meaningful and what's fulfilling. You have to experience what happiness isn't to know maybe what it is. And so in a similar way, several years ago, I was living in Washington, D.C., working a job on paper that was great. I worked for the federal government. I was making $70K a year, which may not seem like a lot for private sector folks, but for me at the time was great. Great benefits, great health care, job security forever. You can't get fired from government, literally. You can't get fired. There are a lot of people that should. You can literally break the law and, like, in many ways still not get fired from working for the federal government, as we know very well. And I experienced all that and all that stuff on paper and going to happy hour and being like, yo, here's my card. And, oh, yeah, I have this job. I work here. And knowing every single morning that I hated my life. And I experienced that. And that's self-experience. It wasn't someone else being like, I don't like my life. I did this. I had to go through that myself to the point where I got shingles, which is actually a nerve disease caused by stress, which is most common among people over the age of 70 or 75. Not 28-year-olds.
Or people that are really, really stressed out.
Or people going through a quarter-life crisis. And we joke about it, and we laugh, and I giggle and laugh, and I'm super open about that. And shit is serious. Like, that's like one step away from clinical depression. And I know a lot of people that go through a quote-unquote quarter-life crisis that actually is depression and really is hard. And so you kind of have to experience that to be like, okay, well, it can't get much worse than this. So I can do anything because I know that if I'm doing something on paper that's right, or if I'm pleasing my parents, or if I'm getting a direct deposit every 2 weeks in my bank account and it's still not right, well, there has to be another way, because I'm not going to live my life like this because I have a nerve disease and my doctor says I need to make a change in my life. So, you kind of have to experience that other side, I think.
So for myself, I grew up small town Oregon, middle of nowhere, and my mom was always really entrepreneurial, so my brother and I would do things like, of course, like sell lemonade, but baseball cards, Blackberries, actual Blackberries, not the electronics. What else did we tried to do a bed and breakfast once, and my mom woke up and got mad at us. She's like, you can't just like put a sign up for bed and breakfast. And so, yeah, we were young, but we were very excited about just creating our own destinies and our own lives. And so very early on, when the internet came about, I started making money online and becoming an entrepreneur, and at one point making more than my parents. And that was the beginning of my journey, where I kind of just saw, wow, like I really can create what I want to create. But I still did what Kate and Adam did, which was like, okay, I need to go to college. I need to do exactly what everyone tells me to do, and I need to do it on a certain time frame. And then at a certain point, I woke up and went, no, I'm going to go travel, and I'm going to go find myself, and I'm going to go be creative and do the things that maybe aren't going to make a lot of money, but that I believe in and that I believe are a big contribution to society. And that, for me, was the beginning of my journey. So I guess I would say to anyone here, how do you cultivate that? I guess just don't give up and follow the little voices and the whispers that tell you should do that. Those are really important. Really, really, really important.
Yeah. And I think on that, like, it comes down to having a taste of when you have that success and it's everything that you think you wanted, and then realizing that you're still not fulfilled. And then you do the rookie mistake of externalizing happiness and fulfillment, and then you realize how simple life can actually be when you don't need all those things. So I was looking a lot into the minimalism movement and all of that, and all the your career, your lease, apartment, everything that you buy. And when I had a full-time job, and I have one now, but when I was working for others, my spending would just expand to fill that paycheck. So I talk about lean living a lot. So you can cut actually a lot of your expenses. And I know people with families and things like that, or kids, it's different. But I think a lot of our time and our money goes into things that don't actually fulfill us. We're just conditioned to think they do.
Yeah, a good example of that, and something that I've been trying to do a lot of work on, is housing, actually. Housing is our number one expense. And our idea of what we need with housing is a little bit crazy. Our houses have ballooned to double the size in the last 50 years, and I think what we really need is some personal space and community. So I think that we need to kind of restructure that, but that's a whole other conversation around like things like co-living and tiny houses, which I'm really excited about. Let's see what we have next. I think I'm going to pop it off to Adam and Kate. They have some questions too. We kind of wanted to keep this a fluid conversation, and we'll give you guys the opportunity to ask some questions towards the end as well. So who wants to be first?
Okay, so my question is geared toward the person in the audience is like, yeah, but man, I got to make money. I got to pay the bills. I got my bank account, Bank of America.
Did you guys hear that?
Could you hear that? Or was I whispering too much? Yeah, you heard it? Yeah. Courtney in the back.
Louder.
She heard it. So my question
Gotta pay the
for
bills.
the panelists, and I'll answer it too, is what advice do you have for people who want to work with purpose and pay the bills?
Do you want me to kick that off?
Sure.
So I think it's all about transitioning. So when we talk about becoming an entrepreneur, there's often that really kind of glamorized, take every risk and just quit everything and go out and, face the kind of abyss. When I was transitioning, I actually kept a part-time job for about a year, and then I started The Fetch and slowly used the income from the part-time job to transition. So we see a lot of people, say at Cloud Peeps, who will transition into freelancing or being an independent. And really, it doesn't have to be like all or nothing. You can take it slow and make that transition over time. So I think there's taking risks, but there's feeling safe. And I still want people to feel safe and smart and feel secure when they're doing that. So I definitely think having alternative streams of income and still working with clients is a great way to make that transition as you're starting your own side projects.
I'm ready.
You ready?
Oh, are you?
You go.
Do you have more?
No, you go.
Keep going.
No, I'm done.
You sure?
Yes.
All right. So how do we pay the bills and live a life of purpose? This is a good one because I definitely went through some really big struggles. Yes, I have a book now and I'm doing fun things and traveling a lot. And I did go through, the depressive period and lots of crying and figuring things out and being broke, frankly. So I think that might actually even be part of the journey. And I would say that I don't think being broke is the end of the world. I think you figure out sort of how to be resourceful in that brokenness. And so for me, for example, there were times where, I swapped my place and stayed with other people and, found ways to make income when my business got cut in half and I was working on creative projects and I was completely unwilling to give up. And I think that's one of the most major things is being unwilling to give up and knowing also when you need to pay the bills and go back and get a full-time job. So about 2 years ago, I did do that. I, looked at my bank account. I had $2,000 left and my rent was $1,500 and I went and got a job an hour away and commuted for 6 months and I did it. I had to. But on the other side of that was more freedom. So I think there will be trials and tribulations and I think that's okay. But I think you have to be okay to go through that in order to get through it.
Yeah, great points. Just to add on, I think that I agree. I think all too often we equate kind of the find your passion, follow your purpose, which if anyone wants to talk to me more about, actually I think is not the best career advice. And if you read my book, you can figure out a little bit more about why. Because I think sometimes people follow passions and purpose that have no business. They aren't good at running that as a business, aren't good at it, and there's no market for it or there's no need for it. Like if you were starting a kombucha shop on Valencia Street and there's like 17 other kombucha shops and you're not that good at making kombucha, probably not a good idea, right? But people still do it because it's like, follow your passion. Also, kombucha. I don't think entrepreneurship's the only way to make a difference or follow your passion. Are any of you in the room entrepreneurs? So making an impact within a company or within an organization or within a bigger structure. I think that's a really big point, and I don't think those are mutually exclusive. I don't think you have to be kind of an entrepreneur to go all in.
Or to catalyze others to create more.
Totally, and that you can use the leverage from working within a larger structure, whether it's for a short amount of time or a long time, to actually have more impact than someone kind of struggling on their laptop at a coffee shop that's broke. But I do want to give the example of my friend Debbie. How many of you have heard of the company Goldie Blocks? It's a toy company that teaches young girls engineering skills. So it's a toy company for girls to learn how to build stuff that reflects the way girls learn, not the way boys learn. And it's not pink. It's not just like a Lego toy that they made pink for girls. So Debbie started this company.
They did that Super Bowl ad about burning pink toys.
Yep, they had a Super Bowl ad. Very, very, very successful startup. Debbie started the company about 3 years ago when we met. She was just getting it going in 2012. And a lot of people, I tell the story of Goldie Blocks, and like, oh my God, she must have quit her job like immediately. That's a great idea. She was getting, like brilliant. She's probably got investors, VCs, just, Silicon Valley just obviously wants to fund tech for girls. That's amazing. She actually stayed on, oh God, don't worry about it. She actually stayed on in her job. She was working as the marketing director for a jewelry company in San Francisco. She stayed on at her job for 9 months after she had the idea for Goldie Blocks. 9 months. Why? Well, first of all, she was about to start a startup, so she knew she was going to be broke and needing money. So there's a purely financial, practical reason. And second of all, she felt like she was getting paid to go to business school, right? So rather than drop like $200,000 on an MBA, there she was working as the marketing director for a company in San Francisco, every day learning skills in sales, marketing, distribution, retail, that she'd be able to apply to her own startup when she left. So I think there's this kind of like, oh, you have to find your passion, jump off the cliff tomorrow, quit your job, post on Facebook. And it's like, wait a second. You were working at a business where you could learn every single skill that you're going to need to know to run your company why didn't you stay on for 6 months or 12 months, make money, learn those skills, and then leave? Or maybe not leave, or maybe like figure out a way to do that at a company that can pay you a good salary while you start your thing on the side. So I think it's more nuanced and complicated than Facebook would have you believe, or than the what I call the passion industrial complex would have you believe. And I think it's really important, because I think entrepreneurs need to start great companies, but they need to do it in a way that's smart and not kind of deceiving other people to make it think that it's going to be easy. Because it's, for me in my own journey, it's been about 3 years of getting to a point where I can self-sustain on my own work. 3 years is a long time.
Same.
3 years. I mean, and I have side projects and other things going on, but that's a long time. And so no one ever talks about those 3 years. They just post the Fast Company article, but they don't actually talk about the 3 years or the 5 years or the 10 years that they were broke. And we need to have more conversations about that.
And I think that people need to know what they're actually, what their business value is. So I talk to a lot of people that have billions of side projects, so many ideas, they're trying to go independent, they're hanging out at co-working spaces and at meetups all the time, but they actually don't know what they're selling within themselves. So I think personal branding is such a,
that's a good
term,
one.
But literally you need to understand what it is inside yourself and what's tangible business value skill sets you have and how you can offer those to clients, especially if you are working with companies and doing that kind of MBA or trying to still be client facing or have that income stream from working with people. And you see it all the time. People just can't find people who want to give them money for what they want to do. So it's just so important to understand what it is and get some feedback from friends and other people about what do you think that I have value for. And you always ask the thing like reputation. So what would someone else say about you? And that usually gives you an indication of how you could sell what you have to offer. But I think without understanding your skills and getting some decent feedback, you won't be able to go on that pathway to paying the bills.
Yeah, I think the first time I understood what I did, I had to write a Twitter profile. I was 140 characters to describe what I am and all adjectives. This is kind of fun. I also want to honor that there are probably some people in the room, myself included, who started out on their journey thinking, I want to be an artist, or I want to be a writer, or I want to contribute in this way, and maybe it's not a business. And at least to begin with, I think often we have these inklings and we have these things that we think about, and we don't really know how or when we're going to make money. But I think following those passions and that purpose is very, very important as well. I think, do what you love and the money will come is cliche, but I think eventually that's true in many, many, many cases. Of course, not 10 kombucha shops on the same block, but you get the idea. So how about you, Kate? You wanna pull out your questions?
Yeah, I've only got 2. Well, that one's kind of boring. I had one what collaborative, how do you collaborate when you're working remotely or as a digital nomad? And then what tools do you actually use? Because I think that's just really tangible kind of takeaways for people to check out different services and things.
Me first? Ooh. Google. I mean, basically Google Hangouts, Google Docs, Skype, staying in constant communication. I will say that working remotely is difficult. It does not translate into the same results, at least for me, as meeting in person. So if you can meet in person as often as possible and as meaningfully as possible, if that means doing offsites or retreats or things like that where you really get to know people, that's really powerful. Like we did with Startup Abroad, which was in Bali. What else? What other collaboration tools? Adam, you got something more interesting than Google?
I'm old school. I take notes in my Moleskine. I'm not a, I'm not a, and I'm also not, I don't call myself a digital nomad. I do a lot of travel for work, but I very much believe in the value of in-person community, and I love my friends and family and folks in San Francisco and the Bay Area, so I'm all about that. But I would say that, and Chelsea alluded to this, but really really focusing on community. And in-person communities. So I have communities that I rely on for professional accountability, to hold me accountable to professional goals. And I mentioned some of those for folks that are interested. Hive Global Leaders Program is one. Starting Block is another for purpose-minded young professionals. And then I also have communities that are more just about fun and being silly and getting together with people that are cool. Camp Grounded is an example of one of those. I know there's some Passion Co people that are here. People in the Passion Co community. Raise your hands higher. Awesome. Passion Co is a company here in San Francisco that does month-long classes to help people commit to doing a passion project. So kind of identifying one of their passions and not necessarily starting a business around it, but just committing to doing something for a month. Because all too often we say we're going to learn how to DJ, or we're going to write a book, or we're going to learn how to become a designer, we're going to make our new website, or we're going to learn how to sew and make a dress, and we never do those things. So actually cultivating the time and space. So I would say that my tools are just actually being around people. I know it's ironic in a tech mecca like General Assembly, but being face-to-face with people as much as possible. Because for me, I do most of my work alone with writing, which is awesome, but also gets super lonely. Yeah. And it's a weird double-edged sword because I literally can't write at a co-working space. So I was going to mention co-working spaces. I'm a member at Impact Hub.
Yes, love co-working.
But I can't write in co-working spaces. Yeah. I love to go there for meetings or to go for an event or to maybe tweet something, but I can't get actual creative work done there. I really envy people that can, but I kind of have to be in my own room with no distractions. And yet, if you're doing that every day for hours and hours, it gets really boring and you get super lonely. So finding that balance, and everyone's different, of solo work versus group work and kind of being around people and that. What's the article people? The Paul Graham piece, the maker versus manager. Maker versus manager. Yeah.
Interesting. I'll add something and then we'll bounce it back to you. So I think that accountability is huge. That's something that has made a tremendous difference in my life. Finding an accountability partner, someone, first of all, figuring out what you want to do, like in a year's time, in a week's time, in a month's time, and kind of chunking it down to like pretty granular level and figuring out like what's urgent and important and what's just important, and not skipping the things that are really important to you because so many urgent things come up. And then having somebody that you check in with weekly to say, hey, did you do that thing? Yes or no, is really, I've found it to be one of the most powerful ways to actually get stuff done and move towards where I want to be, and also have like a sort of intentionality that carries with me everywhere I go.
So from the life hacking kind of title perspective, travel, it's often, obviously San Francisco, I would say almost like the number one place in the world right now for cost of living. Like the average or the median apartment price was like $4,200, like they said last month. That's median, it's not average, but it's just going up and up. I think the average is $3,600 for one bedroom. So I moved back here in January after 2 years in Brooklyn, and New York is like a piece of cake compared to San Francisco. So the thing is, travel doesn't have to be expensive. So I think a lot of the time people think that, you look at Instagram feed and you're like, oh, that person's a trust fund baby. Like, how are they going from place to place and affording it? But it's actually much more affordable to go and live in other places, and even not necessarily overseas, different cities in the US as well. So when I was traveling for the 2 years and working remotely, I was actually saving money than I was living in Melbourne in Australia. So that's one thing to kind of consider. And Nomad List is actually a fantastic resource right now to go and check all sorts of, they've almost got like a Nomad List score, which will talk about pollution in a city, cost of living, rent, Wi-Fi, and all of that stuff. So as I transitioned from being an independent and working by myself, I agree, I think it was a bit lonely and hard to find your footing in a different city. But then with Cloud Peeps, because we're a team, we work remotely, we very much like model on that buffer style culture. So we've got people in Berlin, people in like Brooklyn, Orange County, Toronto. So we've really been collaborating across cities. And I think we've been using Slack for around a year, and that's absolutely changed like how we just run our business. So I think people always talk about Slack, but honestly, when you use it really well, we often check in still at 9 a.m. and every morning, so talking about that accountability. Before, I was often very, very unstructured, and I found that if you are an independent, creating a set routine and really almost like doing 9 to 5, it's ironic because you try and escape the 9 to 5, and then when I work 9 to 5 or 9 to 6, that's when I'm most productive and happiest. And so I plug in tools like Rescue Time in my browser, and it can tell you how many hours you're working, how productive you are, and all of that. So,
and how much you're using social media?
Yeah, so, but we use social media for work, so it keeps saying it's distracting. I'm like, no, that's what we do. But, so that's made a massive impact. And then I'm a big user of business-focused sharing economy services. So that's exactly what Cloud Peeps is, but I also use tools like Zirtual, so I have a remote virtual assistant, and she's absolutely brilliant. So, even it doesn't mean that you need to spend heaps and heaps of money. There's a lot of people and talent that can help you achieve what you need to do. You often see entrepreneurs still doing things like bookkeeping and learning how to do taxes and all of that. You can engage someone for $100 or $200, even less a month, and get it all done. So I think outsourcing, and outsourcing used to be such a dirty word, but I think, there's so many external capacities that will do a better job, and you can use your time smarter. So there's definitely a lot of different tools.
Cool, those are great tools. What was I thinking? Oh, right. One of my questions was, you kind of touched on it a little bit, was I think it's interesting like how we all start our day. When I'm being healthy and super motivated, I have a really great way to start my day. But I'd love to hear how each of you start your day and what your morning routine is.
I have kind of two versions. There's like Morning Kate, who's been, if I followed a good routine for a while, and that's when I'll usually get up around 7:30. Sometimes I'll go for like a San Francisco stair walk and actually, like, I don't know if anyone's gone to the Lion Street steps, like go up and down that. It's it's like an outdoor gym. It's amazing. If anyone wants to join me. So I'll do that, and then I'll get back, and then I'll do like a sprint from like 9 till noon where I just get rid of all of like day-to-day communication. So catch up all of that. Well, it is. It's like, like inbox maintenance. There's a lot of that happens, and then I focus, and then in the afternoon I'll try and do like more meetings. And the other version is, if there's been a late night, we've got stand-up in the morning at like 9 a.m., so it'll be like 8:55. I'll wake up, check Slack, and then like go in my pajamas and like put Google Hangout, not on the visual one, and be like, I'm here, checking in. So, it really depends on what the week's been like.
Okay.
I put a shot of Bailey's and coffee. No, I'm just kidding.
Sounds like a fun house.
Sometimes people are talking about morning routines. He's writing a book about it. Yeah. So if anyone's interested in this. But I think some people's like mornings routines sound like, Jesus, man, like, but that's like 7 days. Like you're doing that in an hour and a half. Like what? But anyways, I'd also caveat, it's important to just figure out something that works for you. Sure. And that everyone's different. And I think all too often in the life design space, we're always just caught up on what Tim Ferriss or whoever the Tim Ferriss that you follow is doing. And
the Ferrissites.
Great for them, but that might just be the worst possible thing for you. And maybe your body doesn't like yogurt or protein powder or whatever. That's
or
just
butter.
My personal rant. But I wake up probably closer to like 8:30ish, 8:15, 8:30, because I like to sleep, and I read or watch Game of Thrones at night. So I need to get my sleep, and then I go for a run first thing, 4 or 5 days a week, because I love running. I've been running pretty much consistently since high school. It's my way of releasing stress, meditating. Thinking. I actually usually come back from runs with like 7 ideas for blog posts, ideas for people I need to call or email, idea for something I'm writing. So it's probably the most valuable part of my day. And on a day where I don't run, it's just generally not as productive or good a day. So that, and then I come back home and I eat breakfast and then usually meditate. And then I try to write. So I try to do my most creative work before I check an email, but I'm not going to lie and say that I do that every day. But that's my most productive days. I don't look at something that's coming at me from the outside world till at least after like 10:30, 11 a.m. preferably later. But we were talking about when I'm in writing mode, like I'm about to go start working on my next book, in which case I'm going to
really exciting. He
shut
got
out
a book deal.
Shut out everything, and I'm going to try not to look at anything from the outside world, unless obviously there's emergency or there are days where you have other commitments. But really, most days, literally until 4 p.m. because otherwise the book won't ever get done. And so that's the only way the last one got done, where I literally you just know nothing that's coming at you from the outside world can enter your creative zone until the part of the day when, at least for me, some people are really good at night. I get really lazy in the evening, towards the late afternoon, evening. So
cool. So on that note, I read a book maybe 2.5 years ago called The Willpower Instinct, and it talked about how the morning is when you have the most willpower and you have the most ability to kind of shape your day and do powerful, meaningful things. And it kind of really impacted me because it's a lot about brain science. I don't remember all of it, but that's the gist of it. So after that, I started sort of crafting on my most productive days also. I'm not going to lie and say I do this every day either. But writing in my journal, drinking some tea, maybe attempting to play my guitar for a few minutes, and just really kind of sinking into that intuitive space, and then going into like the more heady sort of logical, like, okay, what do I need to tackle today space, and looking at what my goals are for that day and what I need to get done versus like what all the things are that I absolutely have to do and that will get done anyway. And then making sure that I actually get those things done. So let's get a little more like controversial and juicy here. Maybe two actually. We'll see how it goes. So what wouldn't you guys share?
What, like in life?
Yeah, like anything.
Probably spouses. I know that's popular in San Francisco, but I'm happy with just one. So everything else, but that's probably just the limit for me.
Is there anything else you wouldn't share?
Well, it's a big question. What about
your laptop? Will you share your laptop?
No, I don't. And I would like get a wet wipe and clean it if someone did borrow it. No, I think.
Chapstick.
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
Things that touch your lips. I don't know.
Yeah, email.
You wouldn't share your email?
Email.
Huh?
My email.
Okay.
I don't want someone to like look at my email.
You don't want someone to look at your
email? Or my journal, actually. One time, when I was when I was moving to DC to San Francisco, I had shipped a bunch of stuff, and I had one box. It had a couple random DVDs and my Moleskine journals, 5 of my journals, which is basically like my life story and my most prized possession. And nothing in there would be of any interest to anyone else, but it's very personal stuff, very graphic, and just my own stuff. And they randomly ended up at this other dude's house that was like 3 blocks away from me. And he told me, he's like, I believe, because I put in my front page of my journal, if you find this, call me, as a reward. Like, I actually say, like, I'll potentially give you a reward, just so people will. And he was like, hey, I think I found your journals. Are you, I looked at the first page. I probably shouldn't be reading it, but I'm here in San Francisco. And I was like, oh my God, thank you, man. They could have ended up anywhere, so I don't want to share that.
Anything else? You good with partners?
No, I'm not. Yeah, I don't. I don't know. Not sharing lovers, no.
Yeah, me either. It's definitely a thing in San Francisco, but yeah, I think it's an interesting question, which leads me into the next one, which is what will we teach future generations or our children about possession and things? Because we're kind of moving into this space of access over ownership and not really needing things and finding identity in our purpose and in community and in other things, which is really fantastic. But I guess this is a big question, but how does that impact you or us as a whole?
What will we teach?
What would you teach your kids if you were to have them? Or your grandkids or nieces or whoever?
I would say to focus on your relationships and the people around you as the most important thing. I think, previous generations, the message may have been more kind of take what you can, get ahead type of thing. That I think that, see if like there was a motto for the baby boomer generation, I think it would be, get ahead and take care of your family. And I think for our generation, it will be more, build a supportive community of people that you love. And it won't just be about the family or your house or kind of your, savings account, retirement, your, the 401k kind of lifestyle. It'll be more about, what did you create? Who did you create with? How strong and resilient is your community? And that's how that will kind of be your legacy, or our legacy.
Awesome. Yay.
I think we need to teach kids of the next generation attention. So in so many digital, right? Like if you ever go and see a kid, they're like iPad, they'll be on a magazine, like a physical, and then trying to expand images and things like that. So it's really quite interesting to see people who have grown up being absolutely connected. And even my 11-year-old cousin now on Instagram, doing selfies, and the selfie generation, and how everyone talks to each other. I don't know if anyone's got kids here and they're seeing their kids and how they in the digital world. I just think it's really interesting. Chelsea growing up on a farm, I grew up on a farm, and I'm really grateful for that experience because I think it helps me keep grounded, especially in a place like San Francisco with the amount of technology. So I think people's attention spans has absolutely gone, at all. If I did university again and had a mobile phone, I only had a brick phone, and that I wouldn't be able to do it. I would just be online 24/7. So I think attention is, the world has changed and no one has attention anymore, and we're just creating content that's shorter and shorter and shorter, like Vines and Periscope, and even watching a half an hour YouTube video now is so I think kids of the next generation need to be taught how to exercise their attention span.
Yeah, and how to be able to have a conversation with somebody, look somebody in the eyes and listen to them.
Huge. Active listening for all of us. I think it's interesting to think about in the future how ownership will be shared. I think that future generations will teach them not just about ownership, but that ownership is better when shared. So, and I think that plays out through, everything from, your couch or your car to business structures and business models like cooperatives and distributing value more equally amongst the value creators. I would like to create a new generation that sees possession and stuff as way less important than experiences and relationships. And I think that's where we're going. And I'm excited to be a part of it with all of you. So, yeah. Let's actually pop it off to the audience because I feel like there's so many brilliant people in this space.
So just second way into the question, the whole idea about kids. We have a 12-year-old, and very much like every meetup you go in San Francisco, it's all about going to this meetup, going to that meetup. You always have all this free time. You can range from this event to that event. You can create this and that. But with a kid, I think you have all these challenges that you don't see when you're just accountable for yourself. So the question I have is, what kind of life hacks have you heard from other parents who are caught in that 9 to 5, I got to make a living, got to pay the bills, and I want to create a movement? I'm caught in the middle of a movement right now. So
I think finding a way that you can integrate your kids into your life is huge. I think this whole idea that your work life and your personal life are completely separate is kind of ludicrous. At least that's how we've structured things, and I don't like it. I think we should just combine it all. So there's co-working spaces that have, space for kids to play and hang out with other kids, like Next Space, Potrero Hill. I know. Even find some other parents that are in the same situation and create a group, where you can kind of all get together and like riff off of each other. And, maybe one parent can be entertaining the kids and hanging out, or maybe they can actually be involved with whatever it is that your passion is. So I would just say, like, keyword is integration. You guys have some ideas also.
I actually find that parents are some of the best people to work with, because all of the stuff that's not a focus just goes away, and fully prioritized, they get shit done. It's amazing. So I actually think it helps you just really get to that core of what you need to do each day.
Yeah, and I say this with the caveat that I have no idea what it's like to raise 2 kids or a child. But just from conversations with my parents, I would say that when you build a family, you start to realize what's really important. And a lot of the things that we think are important, in college or in your 20s or early 30s, just suddenly just don't matter. What other people are doing on Facebook, I don't care. I have to feed my kid. What somebody else's company, oh my God, they're so successful, I don't really care because I have a house and I got to pay the mortgage and whatever. So it suddenly puts into focus who you are, what you're doing, and why you're here, which is really the essence, I think, becomes the essence of anyone that's figured out somewhat of a meaningful path, has kind of answered those questions, why I'm here. And when you start to build a family, one of those main reasons why you're here is to take care of your children and to build a healthy family and healthy community for that family. So I think it's a plus. It's definitely a positive.
Well, there's lots of life hacking sites for parents as well. A lot of criticism around like the minimalism in tiny house, all that movement, but there's actually a lot of great online material about even sites you can use to like swap clothes and stuff like that. So I think, yeah. And there's a lot of co-working spaces, like Chelsea was saying, that have spaces now for kids. And I think I don't know if it gets any easier at 12, but 12 is a lot more like mobile as well, right? I've got friends who are parents that travel back to Australia or England all the time, and they need help. Like, even doing it solo is impossible. So Bali's a fantastic place to go, Bud, for
it's amazing.
Parents. So, yeah.
It's really, really good. I'll just share this like little anecdote. I've always imagined myself traveling at least, a third of the time and having kids and having a family. And I've thought a lot about how that might work. And I haven't figured it out yet because I don't think there's an infrastructure for it quite yet or a structure for it. But I think like a traveling school of some sort where families actually just move together, because the consistency is really what kids need, right? Like is like their friends that they know, but seeing new things and having new experiences and learning things around the world from new cultures is really, really beautiful. So if you can find a way to do both, I think that there's a lot of capacity for that now and in the future. Okay, who else?
I have a question. How you evaluate your work as a freelancers usually, and how you define success for yourself?
How you choose your clients?
No. Like when you finish your project or work, how you say, okay, that was a great project, I'm done. Like, how you evaluate your...
We do that. Like, that's exactly what Carpeeps is about. And I think getting feedback from your client and even surveying them and scheduling accountability calls throughout the project, because I think sometimes you can say, it's 3 months away and you work on it, and often clients are really, really busy as well, and they won't give you much emotional communication or anything back. So I think it's just really, really asking for feedback. So we even have an email that goes out from a peep to a client saying, can you give me feedback? Like, how am I going? And there's 3 questions. I don't know, Tessa, what the other couple of questions are, but even doing those makes a massive difference. Setting clear milestones and clear scope at the start of a project as well, really helps. And then Chelsea, with the accountability, if you want to pair up with another freelancer, I think getting someone to review your work and give you feedback as well. But yeah, generally you have to create milestones, be accountable, get reviews and ratings, or at the end of everything, even if you aren't using a service, can really help give you that feedback. So yeah. And then what was the other part?
How do you know you're successful? Or how do you define success for yourself? This is on a personal level.
I guess I would look at how many like the longevity of those relationships. So if I'm getting referrals back, so that's more of a, like if I've been successful personally as a freelancer, I would see that amount of follow-on kind of work.
This is really hard for someone in my situation because I think that, so for instance, just to make it really real, I recently got a book deal for a book based on my self-published book, which is awesome.
Yay!
But I don't think that necessarily, if I had not closed that deal, I don't think that the last 3 years of my life would have been a failure. And I think that my work would have still been a success because I know that it changed people's lives. So I just think it's really important to create, you know what I mean? Like success is not, a $. It's not the amount of Twitter followers you have. I got a book deal with far, far less Twitter followers than probably half the people in this room and most people that write books. So it's more about the meaning behind what I'm doing. So I think it's really, I like to say that if you're impacting one person's life, for me, that may not be the metric that, Goldman Sachs uses to define impact, but it's, for me, if I impact one person's life, I should keep doing something, keep going. That's a personal metric. But I agree that in terms of feedback, for me, with writing Amazon reviews, comments that people get, if people are being engaged with the work, if it's impacting them, and I think you just kind of know if what you're doing matters, because people will tell you. And if you ask, and I think consistently being able to say, hey, like, what do you think about this post, or what do you think about this design, and constantly getting feedback and iterating on that feedback is obviously, for whatever type of work you do, is so important, especially for me, because I don't work day to day with people on the same project. It's really easy to say like, hey, I'm paying you to give me feedback. Give me feedback. It's another thing if you aren't, you have to kind of go out to your community and go out to people that you trust. And people are often not like people. You have to find people that are really honest, because a lot of people are scared to hurt your feelings, and you have to be like, no, hurt my feelings. What should I change?
Just on that, it's actually really, really hard. So all of these things are really hard. So I think when I was judging personal success, it's like, can you sustain it day to day, month to month, year to year? Because we see a lot of people make the move to freelance. 6 months later, they're back in a full-time job, like hating it again. And then they'll quit that in 6 months and try freelance. So being able to sustain it and set that foundation up, and if you've done it for more than 6 months now or a year, like, you're already successful, because it's really hard to keep going and hustle and find those clients, work outside the box, be independent, motivate yourself. Like, all of these things are working against people. So yeah, if you've done that, congratulations.
Awesome. I find value, meaning, and success in leading through my heart and being in flow. And I know when I'm in flow because I feel kind of light, and I just come up with ideas constantly, and executing on those ideas is effortless. So I do what I can to kind of stay in that state. And I think another element of success for me is knowing that I'm not only leading through my heart and in flow, but contributing something that's meaningful to other people. I don't feel like we're on this planet for a long time, and I think it's really important that my relationships, like one-to-one and, one to the universe, are powerful and loving. So.
Can I add one more?
Please.
And Jordan and I were just having a conversation about this, but I think it's really important to prioritize, and to say, this month, the thing I want to be the most successful at is this, or this project, or this is my most important thing. Or if you're focusing on content, I'm going to focus all in on my blog this month, or this year it's about this book. This book has to get written. That is the main thing, because you cannot do everything.
That's great advice.
And you can't. It's just impossible. And especially people that are involved in any of these types of things, just from the people that I know, are they're stretched thin because they're trying to do too many different things, and they're not focused. And the attention, and because we think we have to be on Twitter and traveling and running this side hustle and advising this company and doing this, and it's cool. It might sound cool, but it's not going to work, and all of them are going to suffer. So focus, and I think being able to prioritize to the point of, I think,
That's huge.
You'll find in the book, I think a lot of the people probably mention this, but they list their most important task for the year, for the month, for the week, for the day, for the morning.
Yeah, and chunking that down, but like reverse almost.
Kind of obsessive, but I think it works.
So before I went independent, I created a bit of a buffer and had that financial buffer that allowed me to take more risks and take more time to find my feet. And then after a while, you just need to make more than you obviously spend. So we don't have like mint.com in Australia, but I've been using it here. And tools like that, brilliant. Like I'll create a budget, stick to that budget. Obviously, you can't get weekly massages and do your hair and all these things if you're living lean. But I definitely think you need to understand how much money you'll have coming in. And it's really impossible sometimes to know when you're taking those leaps because you almost have no paycheck the first time you do it. And you're like, I have no idea where that money's going to come from. So understanding what you can be earning, cut your costs down as much as you can, and your basic kind of counting, get all of the stuff set up right. I originally used to do everything in my personal bank account. Then I set up a new bank account. And that was a huge step because everything was so muddled before. And just setting that up independently, setting up an LLC and an Inc., like things like that, learning how to be business astute makes a massive difference to longevity and sustainability of this lifestyle.
I'll go. I think this is one of the first questions that we actually covered in a different way maybe, but I think for me, it's been just about being relentless, like just never giving up, never losing sight, no matter how I feel or how long something takes or how hard it gets. Because it's going to get hard and you're going to get sad and you're going to get angry and you're going to like have fights with collaborators and you're going to, relationships are going to end, like things are going to get hard. And if you can remember what you're doing and why you're doing it, and there's a powerful enough why, you just have to keep going. Like there's no stopping. And actually one of the things that I do maybe as a hack is I talk about everything that I'm doing major project-wise on the internet so that, like I have a whole network of thousands of people that if I don't do it are like, hey, what's going on with that thing? And I'm like, oh, yeah, right, I need to do that. So eventually it sort of happens. So I'll stop there.
I'll have two, one more serious than the second. The first is knowing your inner critic and being able to defeat it, because I think that is the single biggest thing that obstructs anyone that's a creative or anyone that's trying to do something alternative or something that hasn't been done before or something your parents are freaking out that you're doing or something that your friends are like, dude, that is never going to happen. You have to have that internal compass and know what that voice sounds like, because it's going to come up and it'll come up on, every third Tuesday or every second Tuesday or every Tuesday and Thursday. Like, what am I doing? What am I doing? Or you get, the email Bank of America notification statement, whatever the triggers are, we all have them. And you're like, what am I doing? And to be able to kind of recognize that voice and not get deterred, or get deterred for 20 seconds, take a deep breath and keep going, but not let it overcome you, because if you let it overcome you, you don't do anything. And you rob the world of your gift, which is even worse than robbing yourself of it. So that's the more serious one. The second one that I don't think anyone ever really talks about either, or doesn't talk about enough, is just being able to release and have days and weeks where you take your own time and you take self-care time. And by release I mean release and have fun and relax and treat yourself and do the things that you need to do, whether that's take a trip, take a vacation, go sit on a beach, read a book, have coffee with a friend you haven't talked to, watch Game of Thrones, whatever the hell it is. It doesn't necessarily matter, but as freelancers and it's really and entrepreneurs and creatives, we never give ourselves that time where we're hanging out, but we're kind of still there. We're still checking an email. We're still checking Twitter. We're still kind of working on a project on a Saturday morning. But I think that the people that seem to keep going and sustain month after month, year after year, know when to completely detox and to give themselves that time to recharge.
And they know when to not listen to people. So when I was starting all these things, everyone around you, if they're especially living in more of a box lifestyle, will tell you no. They'd say don't. That's silly.
It's too risky.
Like, everyone will say that, and they'll say it for a long time. And it's always when, they see you get written up in the press, or this happened, that those very people turn around and like, oh, you're amazing, you're so inspirational. But people are often threatened by people changing things. And so just keep at it, because you'll be told by so many people, don't do this, and it's silly, and isn't it time that you gave up because you're getting nowhere? So a really amazing TED Talk for people, everyone's probably heard it now, but just Brene Brown on vulnerability and shame.
So good.
We're taught, when you fail or you take risks, that you should be ashamed of that. And so I've had a lot of experiences, job things didn't work out, started this, didn't work out, and you feel so ashamed because you're taught to feel that way. After a while, when, learn things like the power of vulnerability and leaning into joy and all of that, you don't have to feel ashamed anymore, and then you can really start to do everything. So I think that getting rid of shame, and also when other people are doing things, when you go into that mind that you're like, oh, shouldn't, why don't you try this, or why don't you try that, and shouldn't you give up? Pull yourself back, because we all do it to each other as well. So I think that's why I love entrepreneurs, because they're so unjudgmental.
Yeah, on that note, I just wanted to add to what both of you said, in that, I think surrounding yourself not only with, good energy in yourself to say, yes, I can do this, and, cultivating that from within, also finding people around you that are doing similar things or that will support you and say, yes, go, keep going, keep trying, is so invaluable, and pretty much the only way. I don't know, I'm not great at self-validation, so I definitely need people around me to say keep going. But yeah, I think finding those accountability partners, and also just the cheerleaders in your life that just love you and want to see you succeed in whatever that means for you, is important.
Yeah, I love that you're talking about the values and process as well as the strategy and structure, and my mind's going to the structural aspect of it. I'm sure that Obamacare has helped a bit for the freelance economy. I know that we're moving more towards freelance and contract economy right now, but the structure hasn't really caught up to it. So San Francisco had Healthy San Francisco before Obamacare, which is great. But then there's also, even if you're making poverty wages, you're paying 35% tax. And so that doesn't really seem to make sense. And I'm just curious about, are you involved in any, I know there's the freelancers union, but are you involved in any particular work, or do you see particular areas that our society's structure needs to catch up in order to support?
Yes. And I think that our business structures need to catch up with culture and where we're at in this time, because the Freelancers Union is, I believe it's set up in a cooperative structure of some sort, but finding ways to create, I think I touched on this earlier, value distribution where the value is actually created, and more equally distribute wealth is huge. And I think we need to do a lot more deep thinking about that, both on the social and civic and government side, and also on the business side, because I see a lot of government services being either replicated or changed by new business. But I think that new business is going to sort of start to shift where the value is created, which is in the people ultimately. And if the people have the power, they have the power to switch to something that's better for them. So when we have something that's better for them, where they can say, when I contribute hours to driving or to sharing my home or to whatever it is, I actually own a stake in the business, they're going to do that, right? And then that has implications in terms of how the workers are protected and who chooses what and how and across the chain. So that's the exciting thing for me, is to see and contribute to how that changes, and to not only talk about it, but to eventually create something in that space that either creates conversations or an actual business that does that. So yeah, by 2020, 40% of the US workforce is going to be independent or freelancers. So I think that's absolutely changing so drastically at the moment. In a lot of the places like Australia, we've had a huge freelance economy to date, but we've always had healthcare. So to be able to take those risks and the leaps, it's not been, how am I going to afford this? It's just
and even student loans, right? Like you can just quit and go, oh, I can pay this off and do this over time. So a huge thing is just understanding even how tax works. So I had a friend who was freelancing and they were working with a very great paying client for a year, and then the tax year changed, but you have to often pay installments. So then they started bootstrapping a side project. Their income went way down, but they had to pay the tax of that last year's income. So there's all these things that people just need basic education around. So that's one of the things that we're really trying to pull together is how do you actually work out all your tax? How do you park this away? And I think that it will take a while for government to catch up. But there's a lot more attention in that space in other areas, like with Airbnb lately and Uber and things like that. So I think what's happened in the last couple of months is the whole 1099 economy is exploded. And there was a ruling in California, actually, for one person, it wasn't the whole of Uber's workforce, but that they actually were meant to be an employee. So
Right.
I think that I believe in the future of freelancers, and I think people do want flexibility and freedom, but I think there's a lot of companies that are not honouring that freelance capacity correctly, and I don't want them to kind of murky the water of freelancers for the rest of us. There's sites like Upwork, which was previously Odesk. They've been working with freelancers for over 10 years now, and they haven't had, as much of the problems. They've been very focused on education. But I think it's going to be a huge learning curve, but the more and more people are getting into it. One of the quotes that kind of applies to a bit of millennials that Jeremiah Aliwang said was that his parents' generation had one job in their lifetime. He'll have 5 jobs in his lifetime, and we have 5 jobs at any one time. So it's just a matter of time until we're all like, how do we actually use all this income, understand this income, and pay taxes correctly? And I suppose we'll start to see a lot of amazing tools that are doing that. There's a lot of tools coming in freelancer space right now about how to understand your worth and how to calculate an hourly rate. So, taking all your living costs and drilling it down. But I think the next generation is more specific financial tools as well.
I think there's been conversation, too, around creating a new tax delineation around some of this freelance work, especially that's going on in the sharing economy, because there's this weird thing between I have free time and free space and things that are extra in my life and people that are making a full-time living or a part-time living off of this stuff. And figuring out how to deal with that tax-wise is sort of like where we're lost in transition. So do you have anything to add to that?
One interesting thing is when you're actually a digital nomad, sometimes you're not actually a resident of any place. So there was a while there where I wasn't quite still an Australian resident. I was coming to the US a bit, then I was in like Berlin, and I'm like, where do I actually pay tax? And it used to be that people were like tax evaders going to like Bahamas, and that was only like a rich person problem. But now, you can actually travel and be in different places. So I think that's where the law and tax needs to catch up across nations. Yeah. Yeah, so I was earning income a bit in Australia, and then I was like, not directly here, because you can't earn income here. I can't actually be a 1099 contractor in the US. I can only be a W-2. But there were different places that I was earning it, and the transition and the timing. And it's quite common if you go onto like any of the nomad forums, they're like, where do I actually like do my tax now? So it's the people are talking about global passports and all sorts of stuff for the future.
Right. Digi-hippie problems. Okay, maybe like one last question, actually. Let's wrap this up. Okay, 2 last questions. Quarter life, go.
Well, so now it's interesting because, like 2 or 3 years ago was embrace failure. Failure is the best. And now like everyone's saying that, and it becomes kind of like, all right, well, it's kind of cliche. I think you mentioned, this idea of pivoting. I do believe that, especially when it comes to careers and job exploration, that there's no failure. It's really learning more about kind of who you are and what works for you and what doesn't. So a lot of times, I'll tell my story, and I'm so grateful I had that experience in DC because it actually taught me not only taught me what I didn't want and led me to find what I did want. So it actually wasn't a failure. It wasn't a success. It wasn't the right thing, but it wasn't a quote unquote failure. So I think it's maybe a matter of terms. But I think it's you have to know. I think whether again, this is the problem with the passion. I think, oftentimes, but I'm passionate about it. And it might not be the right business climate, and you might not be the right person skills-wise to make it happen. So I think it's a matter of you have to kind of know where you stand when it comes to whatever it is that you're working on. And that doesn't mean, 1 month is a bad month, you're going to jump ship. But if 16 months are not going well and, you don't see anything changing and you're kind of miserable, probably time to change.
Yeah. That all comes down to growth. So I think you have to just set objective milestones or understand what you need to do and measure that, because you might feel like things are going well and then realize that, or you might not be learning anymore. But if you're not growing, and I mean, that's the basic core premise of, San Francisco tech startups. You can't create something if it doesn't grow. But there's been times when I've created stuff or tried and pushed, and then I've parked the idea, and then a couple of years later I came back to the idea. So I think when you're not naturally feeling, like when Chelsea talks about flow, if it's not growing, if things are just not happening, just park it away and try something else. And I think that it's through those different experiences that you actually might find your way back to that initial core and doing the same thing that you really wanted to do, but it will be in a different format. Other ideas sometimes are the wrong time, the wrong place. You can have a great idea, but it could be 10 years too soon. So, objective milestones, look at the growth, get feedback, all of that.
And pay attention to your bank account. That's important too. That's definitely led me some places. But I like the park it and think about it when things aren't working idea, because I think that, again, the perseverance thing, often things are too early and you're really excited. But if you just give it some time and space, and you keep going, whatever that means, whether that means writing about it or talking to people about it or continuing to cultivate it, I think that you'll get there eventually if it's not a kombucha shop on the same street with 10 other kombucha shops. Okay, Jordan.
I just wanted to add in something to what you were saying earlier. I believe someone had a question about how do you define success and how do you make it work. One big insight I've had in my own life that I think you guys have probably thought about as well is differentiating wants versus needs. Because if you think about it, as a consumer in a consumer lifestyle, we're taught that we need all these things. I mean, I have friends that are investment bankers that make $150,000 in New York, and I can't make it. What are you buying with all that money? I think what it comes down to is you have to put food in your body every day, and you need a roof over your head. And if you really want it badly enough, you can be really, really creative about cutting all of your unnecessary expenses. I know some people who, 3 guys dropped out of school, they moved onto a bus, they repurposed it with a kitchen, with a shower, and bunk beds, and they're actually living rent-free right now just doing that. So if you're really, really passionate, you can make things happen in a lot of creative ways that you may not have thought about beforehand. So.
And maybe you guys can relate to this, but I heard this share last week that it talked about spending a third of the time with people above you, a third of the time with people at your level, and a third of the time with people below you. So it creates a very universal energy in the cycle. I don't know if you guys can relate to that, but I do have a quick question: is how do you deal with resistance in terms of how did you deal with resistance when you were coming up, when you were starting, and how do you deal with resistance now?
Well, first I would invest $10 in a book called The War of Art. Anyone read that? Has anyone read that? The War of Art by Stephen Pressfield. Best book on the whole book is about resistance, and Stephen Pressfield's an incredible writer. So I would buy that on Amazon literally tonight. It's actually $9. It's so good. But he talks a lot about in that book how the more you will have, the more certain that you should actually do something, the more resistance there'll be, right? So there's going to be more fear about writing a book if what you really need to do is write the book, right? It's not going to be if something that, I guess this job is okay. You're going to have a little bit of a resistance, but it's oh my God, move to Costa Rica and open this, eco hotel. I'm scared. I can't even think about it. That's probably maybe the one thing you should be doing, right? So you have to, I think one of the big conclusions of that book is that resistance is part of life, same way as fear, and figuring out a way of embracing that and learning to deal with your own resistance and overcome it is essential. So no one doesn't experience resistance. If they do, they're lying. And it's more of kind of figuring out how I kind of flipping it in from embracing it. And like, if I see resistance today around writing this blog post, that's the most important thing I need to do. If I have resistance about reaching out to one of my mentors, that's the person that I'm going to talk to that's going to tell me to like quit and figure out something else. If I have resistance around like doing my budget because it's been a couple bad months, I probably need to print out my bank statements and do that. So just getting really clear about those realities and that resistance is actually a sign.
I have a big whiteboard at home, and I write like. First of all, I chunk down like my yearly goals, and then I do kind of weekly and monthly. But I write things that I really need to do that I'm resisting in like all areas of my life. I put them under certain subject areas like home and car and personal and health and whatever. And I get like great satisfaction off of crossing things off of the list, and actually like writing that list helps me like just get it out of my head and want to do it more. And then on the psychological side of resistance, how do I deal with it? Social media sometimes. Again, like I'll dip my foot into the water of things that feel uncomfortable, or I'll talk about things that I'm doing, and then that makes me feel more compelled to do it because I guess I'm like a social creature and I get benefit out of doing what I say I'm going to do. So I guess it's that accountability thing once again.
Yeah, just to completely agree with what was said, I think it's about keeping on moving. So, the quote about if you stop pedaling on the bike, you're going to fall off. I think any time that you stop pedaling or you contemplate or you get too afraid, all of those things that are going, should I stop? Don't stop. I mean, what's that song? Don't stop, won't stop. What is that song? I'm trying to...
Wait, are we doing... No,
yeah, we're all
no.
singing. Yeah, just keep going. I mean, it's so cliche, but that's always happened when I've had resistance. I've had a lot of resistance in the past, and the only thing that you can keep doing is taking one step and break it down into really little baby steps, because you don't move mountains or you don't ship big products, you don't do all these things if you're just having this end goal. You actually do it. It's like people who are trying to lose weight. Start by walking around the block, then build it up, then do the marathon. Don't expect to do the marathon tomorrow.